We're remembering 10 R&B groups whose voices once blended perfectly, until jealousy slowly pulled them apart. These were groups that gave us unforgettable harmonies, songs that played at family gatherings, late-night drives, and moments when life felt wide open. Some of these stories ended in silence. Some men ended in solo careers. And a few left us wondering what might have been if pride hadn't stepped in. And the final group on this list might be the one whose breakup still feels the most complicated. Let's start where the memories begin. Number 10, Cruisin' by Smokey Robinson and the Miracles.
Let's cruise away from here.
By the late 1960s, the sound of Motown had already become part of American life. Radios in kitchens, car dashboards glowing softly at night, teenagers gathered around record players. All of it carried the unmistakable warmth of Detroit soul. And right near the center of that sound stood Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. There was something effortless about the way the group worked together.
And inch by inch we get closer and closer.
The harmonies felt like they had always existed. Smooth, patient, never rushed. When a song like Cruisin' drifted through the speakers, it didn't demand attention. It simply settled into the room. But within the group, a quiet imbalance had begun to grow. Smokey's voice was unmistakable, gentle, almost conversational, yet emotionally direct. Record executives recognized it quickly. The spotlight followed him, writing credits piled up. Interviews focused on the soft-spoken lead singer, whose pen seemed to understand love better than anyone. For the other members, that kind of attention could slowly shift the emotional gravity of a group. The Miracles were never just background singers. They had helped build the sound from the beginning. Yet, as the years passed, the public increasingly saw the group as Smokey and everyone else. No arguments exploded on television, no dramatic public feud. Just a slow realization that the balance had changed. Sometimes jealousy doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it simply sits in the corner of the room until the harmony starts to feel different. Number 9, If You Don't Know Me By Now by Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. Philadelphia in the early 1970s had a particular sound. Smooth orchestration, patient grooves, and voices that carried just enough ache to make you lean in a little closer. It was the era of Philadelphia soul, and few records captured that feeling more clearly than this one. The group itself carried the name Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, but if you were listening carefully, another voice slowly began to take center stage. That voice belonged to Teddy Pendergrass. There was a weight to it, deep, commanding, and full of quiet urgency. When he stepped into a song, the room seemed to shift slightly. Audiences noticed, radio stations noticed, and before long, the industry noticed too. But inside the group, that rising attention created a delicate tension. The band still carried Harold Melvin's name, a decision rooted in years of leadership and early struggle. Yet, night after night, audiences responded most strongly to the powerful baritone standing at center stage. It's a complicated feeling when admiration for a voice begins to compete with questions about recognition.
Say goodbye. What good is a love affair?
One telling detail came from live performances. As the years passed, the crowd would often chant Teddy's name after certain songs, a spontaneous reaction that no one on stage could control. For listeners, it felt like magic. For the group dynamic, it quietly shifted the balance. Eventually, the tension reached a point where continuing together simply wasn't possible. Teddy Pendergrass stepped into a solo career that would make him one of the defining voices of the decade. But when you hear this song today, there's still a sense of the moment before everything changed. Because sometimes the strongest voice in the room also carries the weight of what it leaves behind. Number 8, Ooh Baby Baby by Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. Some songs feel like a confession whispered into the dark. That's the atmosphere surrounding this record. Slow, tender, and filled with the kind of vulnerability that R&B did better than almost any other music of its time. By the mid-1960s, the Miracles were already central to Motown's rise. They had helped define the label's early identity, recording songs that balanced sweetness with emotional honesty. But once again, the public attention kept circling back to one person. Smokey Robinson's voice had a softness that carried enormous emotional weight. He never forced the note. Instead, he let the feeling arrive naturally, like someone choosing their words carefully during a difficult conversation. One quiet studio detail often mentioned by musicians from the era was how Smokey approached recording. He rarely oversang. Instead, he'd deliver a vocal in a single focused take, trusting the feeling more than perfection. For listeners, that vulnerability felt deeply personal. But inside a group, that level of recognition can slowly reshape relationships. The Miracles had always been collaborators, yet the narrative surrounding the music increasingly centered on one man's voice and songwriting. No one set out to create that imbalance. Fame simply has a way of choosing its own focal points, and over time, that spotlight can feel warmer for one person and a little colder for everyone standing beside them. Number 7, Ain't No Sunshine by Bill Withers and the Watts, 103rd Street Rhythm Band. Sometimes a song feels so personal that it almost sounds like it came from one man sitting alone with a guitar. That's the quiet atmosphere surrounding this record. In the early 1970s, the Watts' 103rd Street Rhythm Band had already built a reputation as a tight, reliable group of musicians. They knew how to build a groove without crowding it. The kind of band that made a singer feel safe stepping into a vulnerable moment. When Bill Withers recorded this song, the band created a simple, steady frame around his voice. Nothing flashy, just space. And in that space, the emotion had room to breathe. Withers' delivery carried a kind of everyday honesty. Not dramatic heartbreak, not theatrical sorrow. Just the quiet realization that someone important is gone. When he repeated the phrase, "I know, I know, I know," it sounded less like songwriting and more like someone trying to convince themselves. But as the song grew into a massive success, the balance between singer and band began to shift. Bill Withers was suddenly being seen as a singular voice, an artist whose songs felt deeply personal and unmistakably his own. Record labels and producers leaned into that identity, encouraging him toward a solo path. For the band that had helped shape those early recordings, the attention naturally followed the man at the microphone. No shouting matches, no dramatic headlines, just the quiet understanding that one career was rising in a direction the group couldn't follow together. And when you listen now, the song still carries that feeling. Sometimes the softest songs carry the heaviest goodbyes. Number 6, Easy by Commodores.
I'm easy like Sunday morning.
The late 1970s were a moment when R&B groups filled arenas with a kind of confidence that felt effortless. The grooves were polished, the harmonies warm, and the bands looked like they belonged exactly where they were. Among them stood the Commodores. The group had built its reputation through tight musicianship and stage chemistry. Every member had a role. Every voice blended into something bigger than itself.
Sounds funny, but I just can't stand the pain.
But one voice gradually began to carry a slightly brighter spotlight. Lionel Richie had a gift for melody, that seemed to land directly in the emotional center of a song. His delivery wasn't aggressive or flashy. Instead, it felt conversational, like someone sitting beside you explaining exactly how they felt. Easy captured that approach perfectly. One small studio detail tells the story well. During recording, Richie reportedly insisted that the vocals stay relaxed and unforced, resisting the urge to make the song bigger than it needed to be. The result was a performance that felt intimate, even on a large record. Audiences connected with that immediately. But inside a group built on shared identity, a growing solo spotlight can create complicated emotions. As Lionel's songwriting and public recognition expanded, the music industry naturally began to imagine what he might sound like on his own. And eventually, that question answered itself. Because sometimes success doesn't break a group overnight. Sometimes it simply opens a door, and one person walks through it. Number 5, You're a Big Girl Now by the Stylistics.
No more daddy's little girl.
Some songs don't try to impress you. They simply arrive, soft, patient, and honest. That was often the atmosphere surrounding the Stylistics during the early 1970s. Their records carried a gentle elegance that felt almost weightless. Lush strings, careful arrangements, and a voice that floated high above the music. At the center of that sound was Russell Tompkins Jr. His falsetto was unmistakable. Light but piercing, delicate, yet emotionally direct. When it entered a song, it seemed to hover just above the melody rather than sit inside it.
If you must, you can.
Listeners immediately recognized that voice. And while the group's harmonies were beautiful, the public conversation often returned to one question: who is that singer? One detail musicians often recall is how Tompkins recorded many vocals standing very still, barely moving his body. He relied on control rather than power, letting the emotion carry through the precision of his delivery. But success can quietly reshape expectations. As record sales grew and Tompkins' voice became the group's signature,
No more daddy's little girl.
tensions slowly developed over recognition, compensation, and leadership within the group. No single moment shattered things. Instead, years of imbalance built up quietly, until eventually the group's lineup fractured in ways that never fully healed. When you hear this record today, the emotion still feels tender, because sometimes the most fragile voice in a group also carries the weight of the deepest fractures. Number 4, Just My Imagination, Running Away With Me by The Temptations.
She belongs to you.
By the early 1970s, The Temptations were already legends. They had defined the Motown sound for years: sharp suits, precise choreography, and harmonies that seemed perfectly engineered for radio. But behind that polished stage presence, the group had lived through constant change. Lead singers came and went, creative direction shifted, and each new era of the group brought different voices into the spotlight.
Every night on my knees I pray.
This particular song arrived during the time when Eddie Kendrick's falsetto had become one of the most recognizable sounds in soul music. His voice had a fragile clarity to it. Not dramatic, not forceful, just gentle enough to make the emotion feel almost private. And that tenderness carried the entire song. One quiet detail about the recording is how producers deliberately kept the arrangement restrained, allowing Kendrick's voice to float above the orchestra rather than compete with it. The result was a song that felt like a daydream, but within the group, tensions had already begun to form. Kendrick's was growing increasingly frustrated with internal dynamics, management decisions, and the constant reshuffling of roles within the group. Recognition, leadership, and creative control were all part of the conversation. Eventually, those frustrations became too heavy to ignore. He left the group in 1971 to begin a solo career. And when you listen to this song now, there's something quietly fitting about it. Because sometimes the sweetest dream in a song is the one where someone finally imagines life somewhere else. If you're still listening, you're probably one of us. Subscribing helps keep these memories and the stories behind them alive. Number 3, Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye and the Originals. Some records feel like they were made in a moment when everything in the room shifted. In the early 1970s, the Originals were part of the Motown family, a group known for rich harmonies and a smooth Detroit polish that had become the label's signature. They had been building their place within the Motown sound for years, often recording songs that carried the same romantic warmth listeners had come to expect. But during this period, something else was happening inside the studio walls. Marvin Gaye was stepping into a new creative space, one that felt more personal, more sensual, and more confident than anything he had recorded before. The song carried that energy immediately. His voice moved through the melody with a quiet authority, never rushed, never forced. It felt like the sound of someone completely aware of the power in a whisper. One small studio detail captures the atmosphere well. Producers recalled that many of Marvin's vocal takes arrived with very little rehearsal. He would simply step to the microphone, feel the moment, and let the emotion lead the performance. Let your love come out. For the surrounding musicians and vocal collaborators, it was unforgettable. But that kind of singular presence can also shift the balance in a room. As Marvin Gaye's star rose higher, attention naturally followed him rather than the groups and collaborators around him. The spotlight, once shared across Motown's roster, began concentrating around one of its brightest voices. And sometimes, when one light burns that brightly, the others slowly fade from view. Number 2, Shining Star by Earth, Wind & Fire. If some groups slowly unravel, others carry tension beneath the surface of remarkable unity. Earth, Wind & Fire built a sound that felt almost cosmic, horns bursting with joy, rhythms that moved like sunlight, and harmonies that seemed to lift entire arenas off the ground. When Shining Star arrived in the mid-1970s, it felt like pure celebration. The groove was infectious, confident, and full of movement. The band sounded unstoppable. But even inside a group built on optimism, recognition can become complicated. The creative vision behind much of the music belonged to Maurice White, whose leadership and direction shaped nearly every aspect of the band's identity. At the same time, Philip Bailey's soaring falsetto began capturing enormous attention from audiences and critics alike. That voice had an almost otherworldly quality, high, clear, and full of spiritual brightness. One fascinating detail from live performances was how Bailey would often close his eyes during the highest passages, leaning slightly away from the microphone as if letting the note carry itself. For listeners, it felt transcendent. But inside a large ensemble, the balance between vision, leadership, and public attention can quietly create strain. Different ambitions begin to form. Solo ideas emerge. Recognition lands unevenly across the group. Earth, Wind & Fire continued making music together for many years, but the pressures of success slowly shifted the original chemistry that once held everything perfectly in place. Because sometimes even the brightest stars still cast shadows. Number 1, I'll Be There by the Jackson 5. Sometimes the most powerful voices arrive when the singers are still children. In the early 1970s, the Jackson 5 burst into the world with an energy that felt almost unstoppable. 5 brothers from Gary, Indiana, dressed in bright Motown suits, moving in perfect choreography while harmonies bounced through living rooms across America. And right at the center of it all was a young voice that seemed to carry something far beyond its years. That voice belonged to Michael Jackson. When I'll Be There reached the radio, listeners heard something extraordinary.
I'll be there to protect you. Yeah, baby.
His delivery wasn't simply talented, it felt emotionally complete. Gentle, pleading, and deeply sincere, as if the words had lived inside him long before the recording began. One detail producers often recalled was how Michael approached the microphone with intense focus, even as a teenager. He listened closely to every note, often asking to try another take just to make the feeling slightly stronger. The result was a performance that felt timeless. But inside the group, the spotlight slowly narrowed. The Jackson 5 had started as a true family unit, each brother contributing to the stage presence and sound. Yet, as Michael's star rose higher and higher, the music industry began imagining a future centered almost entirely around him.
I'll be there.
For his brothers, that shift was complicated. Pride in family success existed alongside the quiet awareness that one voice was now carrying most of the world's attention. Eventually, Michael stepped forward into a solo career that would redefine pop music forever. But when you hear this record today, there's still something beautifully fragile about it. Because for a moment in time, 5 brothers were standing together, and the world was listening. The strange thing about harmony is that it only works when everyone is willing to listen. The groups we remember tonight gave us songs that still drift through the years. Songs that played during first dances, late-night drives, quiet evenings when the radio filled a room with feeling. But behind many of those records were human emotions that no microphone could capture. Pride, ambition, hurt feelings, the quiet wish to be seen. And sometimes, those emotions pulled voices apart that once sounded inseparable. Still, the music remains. And every time one of these songs finds its way back to the speakers, the harmony returns, even if just for a few minutes. If you spent part of your life with this music, thank you for sitting here and remembering it. And if you'd like to open another door to those years, there's another story waiting on the screen now. One that looks back at how New York built the golden sound of 70s R&B. Whenever you're ready, we'll keep remembering together.